Welcome to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Glad to have you along. Your stream is brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first. And Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. So Taylorville Memorial Hospital right now is offering a grief support group. It's a 6-week support group. And right now I have Sister Rose McCown in studio to talk about it. It's great to have you here, sister.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the grief support group. I have been working at the hospital for 18 years now, and we have had a grief support group on a monthly basis up until COVID. And then when COVID happened, we were not able to gather, and also having the mask made it difficult to hear and understand. So we are going to start the grief support group up again, and we're going to start first with a 6-week grief support group, and then that will be followed by monthly meetings. Uh, uh, the grief support group will begin on Thursday, October 13th. We will meet from 10:30 in the morning until 12 noon in room 1222 at the hospital, and that is right by the south entrance. The group is open to people of all faiths and of no faith. However, registration is required so that we have enough seating and hand out information. And so to register, I'm asking you to call our executive secretary, Cheryl Sexton, at 217 707 5250. That is Cheryl Sexton, 217 707 5250. And then just leave your name and telephone number, and I will call you back. And when I speak with you by phone, please speak slowly and clearly. The group is limited to a minimum of 3 people and a maximum of 12. So call soon to save your space. And I'm also leaving flyers here at the radio station if anyone would like to pick them up.
I have a piece of clarification for you. I heard you, and I don't want to step on you, but I heard you say that it starts October 13th. The flyer says September 8th. Is that a typo?
No, we're going to start September the 8th.
Okay.
It's a Thursday morning, and then we will meet on a weekly basis each Thursday morning at 10:30 a.m., and the course will end on October 13th. And then we will continue with our monthly group meetings in November. I don't know when that will be yet.
You mentioned that you've had this grief support group before COVID. Were you participating in that grief support group?
Yes, I facilitated that group, and along with the bereavement coordinator with Bitsy, who would fill in when I would need to be off. And sometimes we had just 3 people in the group, and sometimes we had 10 people in the group. And then often we would go out for a meal after our meeting to one of the area restaurants. It's just a safe place for people to work through their grief.
Who do you often see participating in the grief support group? Obviously, people going through grief, but what are some common situations you see?
Often people are so overwhelmed with their feelings, they feel like they're going crazy. And we live in a society that often says, well, you should be over it by now. And then you never get over the grief over the death of a lost one. You learn to make a part of your life, but you don't get over it. So the grief group is where you can be in the company of other people. You can let the tears flow. Tears are God's holy water. They help us feel better. And you feel support from one another. The biggest part of the group is the support that the participants give to one another. So grief is the price that we pay because we love. Um, and yet we live in a culture that doesn't want to talk about it. Or we may meet people who try to fix us. And the grief wound cannot be fixed, it only can be healed from within. It's like when we get a wound, our fingers cut, it's numb. We feel numb when someone dies. Then it starts to bleed. Then it starts to hurt. And then it starts to heal. And the grief wound is the deepest wound that we will ever have. And it's not a journey we can take by ourselves. It's the hardest journey that we will ever take in our life. And if we don't take the journey, if we try to do our grief work by ourselves, um, it won't happen. We need one another to help us on the grief journey. Sometimes we have family, sometimes we have friends, and sometimes we have the grief support group.
Obviously, you have a lot of experience with dealing with grief, obviously through the support group, but sounds like too you just have a lot of life experience too that helps you kind of navigate others through this grief support group.
Yeah. Yes, I'm no expert in grief support. I don't know if there are any experts. We are always learning from one another. Each death, the grief is different, and and our grief is unique as our fingerprints, and and so it's accepting whatever I'm feeling at this time. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. It's your way, and you take as long as you need. Um, there's no time limit. And sometimes you feel like you're feeling better, and it's all of a sudden an earthquake. The feelings come back up. Um, Again, you don't get over a death. You learn to integrate it into your life. It becomes part of who you are. Um, and each death will bring up the grief from other deaths in your life.
I would imagine that there's a lot of sharing of experience when you go to the grief support group. What kind of exercises do you use to start to facilitate some of that conversation?
We have handouts from different authors like Alan Wolfert. Now, he is a grief expert. Doug Manning, he was a Baptist minister, and I met him in person when I was in Pennsylvania, and he talked about when he was a minister, his biggest goal was to get through the funeral without people crying. And then one day he met this woman after the service, and he's trying to fix her. And she said, "Don't take my grief away. I have a right to my grief." And this was as her daughter died. And he became a grief counselor. And he saw how his whole role as a pastor was trying to keep people from crying. Whereas the grief journey is we can't fix people, we can only walk with them. We don't heal. The healing comes from within, and it happens overnight. Sometimes you're feeling bad for a long time, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're feeling better.
Really quickly, sister, I would like you to provide the details of this 6-week group, the grief support group, before we head into a quick break, and then we'll continue our conversation.
Most of it is the group is supporting one another, so it's the interaction with one another. That's why we if we don't have at least 3 people in the group, you can't have the sharing. And we look about like Alan Wolfert will have what you call the Mourner's Bill of Rights, and we will go over each one of them and see where do I fit in there, how does this fit in my life, and just more information to facilitate the sharing, because maybe one word in an article may spark conversation for you.
Again, the grief support group, Thursday mornings, September 8th through October 13th. This is just the initial session. There's more to come after this, right, Sister Rose? After the October 13th.
Yes, after October 13th, we will go back to having the monthly grief support group. I just have not figured out a time when we will have that yet.
All right. 10:30 in the morning from September 8th, Thursdays through October 13th from 10:30 to noon, and the first floor of the TMH conference room. That's room 122 in the south entrance. More from Sister Rose right here on WTIM, your information station. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark, and People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first.
WTIM. Your information station, WTIM.
Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Glad to have you here. People's Bank and Trust is a proud sponsor. They put people first, along with Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. Taylorville Memorial Hospital holding a grief support group. It's a 6-week grief support group. Weekly, September 8th through October 13th, Thursday mornings for 6 weeks. From 10:30 in the morning until noon on the first floor of the TMH conference room number 1222 in the south entrance. Registration is required, and I have Sister Rose McCowan to talk a little bit about how you can register for the grief support group. So, Sister Rose, how can you register?
Okay, you can call the hospital, the secretary, and her phone number is 217-707-5250. And she will take your name and phone number, and then I will call you and we will talk more about the group and welcome you on September the 8th. I do want to, want to say that Taylorville Memorial Hospital and Memorial Home Hospice is offering this grief support group. So it's both entities. We all work together. And one thing I did not say before, a feeling that a lot of people feel often if their loved one has been very sick and has suffered much, there's a feeling of relief that comes when someone dies, and that they're not suffering anymore. And then the loved one can feel guilty because they're feeling relieved. But relief is a normal emotion, and it comes from you don't have to worry about them now. You know they are in God's care, and God is taking care of them. And so that worry and the care has been taken off of your shoulders. But it's important to do the grief work, because if we don't do the grief work, we won't make it through life. We'll always have those wounds within us, and they need to be healed. So I welcome you to the grief group. Again, it is open to people of all faiths and people of no faith. But please call and sign up, and because if we don't have at least 3 people, we will not have the course. But we're hoping to fill all the 12 spaces. So God bless all of you as you listen and respond.
217-707-5250. One more time with that phone number to sign up. 217-707-5250. And the flyer asks you leave your name, telephone number, and Sister Rose will return your call. And because she's operating off a answering machine, please speak slowly and clearly. She doesn't want to have to repeat the message. Just one of the... Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Anyway, so one of the things you alluded to a little bit that you will talk about with this grief support group is the Mourner's Bill of Rights. Now, I don't want to go give away anything, but what's the number one right for a mourner?
The number one right, according to Alan Wolford, who has much experience in grief work, you have the right to experience your own unique grief. No one else will grieve the exact same way you do. So when you turn to others for help, don't allow them to tell you what you should or should not be feeling.
And that's just one of the many things you will learn, and just one of the many experts you'll learn from.
Yes, we're learning from other experts, and we're learning from one another.
Well, Sister Rose, is there anything else that you'd like to say about what people will learn when they participate in the grief support group?
People will learn, and people, I feel, will have a sense that the burden is being lifted from their shoulder, that I'm in a place where some people understand what I'm going through. Even though their grief is different from mine, we're on the journey of grief. It is a long journey. It's the hardest journey we ever take. It's the price we pay for love. If we're human, if we love, we grieve.
And one more time, because you're here to promote this
Yes.
support group, I want to give you the opportunity to give the rundown, time, date, place, etc. One more time before we go.
Okay, again, it will start on Thursday, September 8th at 10:30 in the morning, and will go until 12 noon. We will meet at Taylorville Memorial Hospital Conference Room, room number 1222 by the south entrance. All you would need to do is come into the south entrance, and someone will direct you to the classroom. We will meet for 6 weeks, and then we will follow up with monthly meetings. But you do not need to be part of the 6 weeks in order to come to the monthly meetings.
And you can register at 217-707-5250.
Correct.
All right.
Right.
That is Sister Rose McCown. Thank you so much, Sister Rose.
Thank you very much.
You're listening to WTIM.